Hello and welcome back to Brendan Moyer's Playwright Corner, where I read plays, poems, or whatever's currently striking my fancy at the moment. Today we're going to be finishing out Edward Lear's complete nonsense, entitled Nonsense Songs. The Owl and the Pussycat. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows. And there in a wood a piggy-wig stood, with a ring at the end of his nose. His nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" said the piggy. "I will." So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with the runcible spoon. And hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, they danced by the light of the moon. The Duck and the Kangaroo. Said the duck to the kangaroo, "Good gracious, how you hop! Over the fields and the water too, as if you would never stop! My life is a bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out in the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you," said the duck to the kangaroo. "Please give me a ride on your back," said the duck to the kangaroo. "I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through. And we'd go to the Dee and the Jelly-Bolee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride, oh do," said the duck to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo to the duck, "This requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck, and there seems but one objection, which is, if you'll let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and would probably give me the rue." "'Tis," said the kangaroo. Said the duck, "As I sate on the rocks, I have thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks, which fit my webbed feet neatly. And to keep out the cold I've brought a cloak, and every day a cigar I'll smoke, all to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo." Said the kangaroo, "I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale, but to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady, and quite at the end of my tail." So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy, oh who, as the duck and the kangaroo? The Daddy-long-legs and the Fly. Once Mr. Daddy-long-legs, dressed in brown and grey, walked upon the sands upon a summer's day. And there among the pebbles, when the wind was rather cold, he met with Mr. Floppy Fly, all dressed in blue and gold. And as it was too soon to dine, they drank some periwinkle wine, and played an hour or 2 or more at battlecock and shuttledore. Said Mr. Daddy-long-legs to Mr. Floppy Fly, "Why do you never come to court? I wish you'd tell me why. All gold and shine, in dress so fine, you'd quite delight the court. Why do you never go at all? I really think you ought. And if you went, you'd see such sights, such rugs and jugs and candlelights, and more than all the king and queen, 1 in red and 1 in green." "Oh, Mr. Daddy-long-legs," said Mr. Floppy Fly, "it's true I never go to court, and I will tell you why. If I had 6 long legs like yours, at once I'd go to court. But oh, I can't, because my legs are so extremely short. And I'm afraid the king and queen, 1 in red and 1 in green, would say aloud, 'You are not fit, you fly, to come to court a bit.'" "Oh, Mr. Daddy-long-legs," said Mr. Floppy-Fly, "I wish you'd sing one little song, one Mumbian melody. You used to sing so awfully well in former days gone by, but now you never sing at all. I wish you'd tell me why. For if you would, this silvery sound would please the shrimps and cockles around, and all the crabs would gladly come to hear you sing a hum-de-hum." Said Mr. Daddy-long-legs, "I can never sing again, and if you wish I'll tell you why, although it gives me pain. For years I could not hum a bit, or sing the smallest song, and this the dreadful reason is, my legs are grown too long. My 6 long legs all here and there oppress my bosom with despair, and if I stand or lie or sit, I cannot sing one single bit." So Mr. Daddy-long-legs and Mr. Floppy-Fly sat down in silence by the sea and gazed upon the sky. They said, "This is a dreadful thing. The world has all gone wrong, since one has legs too short by half, the other much too long. One nevermore can go to court because his legs have grown too short. The other cannot sing a song because his legs have grown too long." Then Mr. Daddy-long-legs and Mr. Floppy-Fly rushed downward to the foaming sea with one spontaneous cry, and there they found a little boat whose sails were pink and grey, and off they sailed among the waves, far and far away. They sailed across the silent main, and reached the great Gromboolian plain, and there they play for evermore, at battlecock and shuttledore. The Jumblies. They went to sea in a sieve, they did, in a sieve they went to sea. In spite of all their friends could say, on a winter's morn, on a stormy day, in a sieve they went to sea. And when the sieve turned round and round, and everyone cried, "You'll all be drowned!" they cried aloud, "Our sieve ain't big, but we don't care a button, we don't care a fig, in a sieve we'll go to sea!" Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed away in a sieve, they did, in a sieve they sailed so fast, with only a beautiful pea-green veil tied with a ribbon by way of a sail to a small tobacco-pipe mast. And everyone said, who saw them go, "Oh, won't they be soon upset, you know, for the sky is dark and the voyage is long, and happen what may, it's extremely wrong in a sieve to sail so fast." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. The water it soon came in, it did, the water it soon came in. So to keep them dry they wrapped their feet in a pinky paper all folded neat, and they fastened it down with a pin. And they passed the night in a crockery jar, and each of them said, "How wise we are! Though the sky be dark and the voyage be long, yet we never can think we were rash or wrong, while round in our sieve we spin." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. And all night long they sailed away, and when the sun went down, they whistled and warbled a moony song to the echoing sounds of a coppery gong in the shade of the mountains brown. "O Timballo, how happy we are, when we live in a sieve and a crockery jar, and all night long in the moonlight pale we sail away with a pea-green sail, in the shade of the mountains brown." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed to the western sea, they did, to a land all covered with trees, and they bought an owl and a useful cart, and a pound of rice and a cranberry tart, and a hive of silvery bees. And they bought a pig and some green jackdaws, and a lovely monkey with lollipop paws, and 40 bottles of ringbow-ree, and no end of Stilton cheese. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. And in 20 years they all came back, in 20 years or more, and everyone said, "How tall they've grown, for they've been to the lakes and the terrible zone, and the hills of the Chankly Bore." and they drank their health and gave them a feast of dumplings made of beautiful yeast. And everyone said, if we only live, we too will go to sea in a sieve, to the hills of the Chankly Bore. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. The Nutcrackers and the Sugar Tongs. The Nutcracker sate by a plate on the table, and the Sugar Tongs sate by a plate at his side. And the Nutcracker said, don't you wish we were able along the blue hills and green meadows to ride? Must we drag on this stupid existence forever, so idle and weary, so full of remorse? While everyone else takes his pleasure and never seems happy unless he is riding a horse. Don't you think we could ride without being instructed, without any saddle or bridle or spur? Our legs are so long and so aptly constructed, I'm sure that an accident could not occur. Let us all of a sudden hop down from the table and hustle downstairs and each jump on a horse. Shall we try? Shall we go? Do you think we are able? The Sugar Tongs answered distinctly, of course. So down the long staircase they hopped in a minute. The Sugar Tongs snapped, and the Crackers said, crack! The stable was open, and the horses were in it. Each took out a pony and jumped on its back. The cat in a fright scrambled out of the doorway. The mice tumbled out of a bundle of hay. The brown and white rats and the black ones from Norway screamed out, they are taking the horses away! The whole of the household was filled with amazement. The cups and the saucers danced madly about. The plates and the dishes looked out of the casement. The salt-cellar stood on his head with a shout. The spoons with a clatter looked out of the lattice. The mustard pot climbed up the gooseberry pies. The soup ladle peeped through a heap of veal patties, and squeaked with a ladle-like scream of surprise. The frying pan said, it's an awful delusion. The tea kettle hissed and grew black in the face. And they all rushed downstairs in the wildest confusion to see the great Nutcracker Sugar Tong race. And out of the stable with screaming and laughter, their ponies were cream-colored, speckled with brown. The Nutcrackers first and the Sugar Tongs after rode all round the yard and then all round the town. They rode through the street and they rode by the station. They galloped away to the beautiful shore. In silence they rode and made no observation, save this, we will never go back any more. And still you might hear, till they rode out of hearing, the Sugar Tongs snap and the Crackers say crack, till far in the distance their forms disappearing, they faded away, and never came back. Calico Pie. Calico Pie, the little birds fly down to the calico tree. Their wings were blue, and they sang tilly-loo, till away they flew. And they never came back to me. They never came back, they never came back, they never came back to me. Calico Jam, the little fish swam over the syllabub sea. He took off his hat to the sole and the sprat and the willy be wet. But he never came back to me. He never came back, he never came back, he never came back to me. Calico Band, the little mice ran to be ready in time for tea. Flippity-flop, they drank it all up and danced in the cup. But they never came back to me. They never came back, they never came back, they never came back to me. Calico Drum, the grasshoppers come, the butterfly, beetle, and bee. Over the ground, around and around, with a hop and a bound. But they never came back to me. They never came back, they never came back, they never came back to me. Mr. and Mrs. Spicky Sparrow. On a little piece of wood, Mr. Spicky Sparrow stood. Mrs. Spicky sate close by, a-making of an insect pie, for her little children 5, in the nest and all alive, singing with a cheerful smile, to amuse them all the while, twicky-wicky-wicky-wee, wicky-bicky-twicky-tee, spicky-bicky-bee. Mrs. Spicky Sparrow said, Spicky darling, in my head many thoughts of trouble come, like to flies upon a plum. All last night among the trees I heard you cough, I heard you sneeze, and thought I, it's come to that, because he does not wear a hat. Chippy-wicky-sicky-tee, bicky-wicky-ticky-me, spicky-chippy-wee. Not that you are growing old, but the nights are growing cold. No one stays out all night long without a hat. I'm sure it's wrong. Mr. Spicky said, how kind, dear, you are to speak your mind. All your life I wish you luck. You are a lovely duck. Witchy-witchy-witchy-wee, twitchy-witchy-witchy-bee, ticky-ticky-tee. I was also sad and thinking, when one day I saw you winking, and I heard your sniffle snuffle, and I saw your feathers ruffle. To myself I sadly said, she's neuralgia in her head. That dear head has nothing on it. Ought she not to wear a bonnet? Witchy kitchy kitchy wee, spicky witchy mickey bee, chippy whippy chee. Let us both fly up to town, there I'll buy you such a gown, which completely in the fashion you shall tie with sky blue sash on, and a pair of slippers neat to fit your darling little feet, so that you will look and feel quite galubious and genteel. Chicky wicky bicky see, chicky wicky wicky bee, twicky witchy tea. So they both to London went, alighting on the Monument, whence they flew down swiftly, pop, into Moses' wholesale shop. There they bought a hat and bonnet, and a gown with spots upon it, a satin sash of clocksome blue, and a pair of slippers too. Zicky wicky micky bee, witchy witchy mitchy key, sicky ticky wee. Then, when so completely dressed, back they flew and reached their nest. Their children cried, "Oh, Ma and Pa, how truly beautiful you are!" Said they, "We trust that cold or pain we shall never feel again. While perched on tree or house or steeple, we now shall look like other people. Witchy 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 wee, twicky bicky bicky bee, sicky sicky tea." The broom, the shovel, the poker, and the tongs. The broom and the shovel, the poker and tongs, they all took a drive in the park, and they each sang a song, ding-a-dong, before they went back in the dark. Mr. Poker he sate quite upright in the coach, Mr. Tongs made a clatter and clash. Miss Shovel was dressed all in black with a brooch, Mrs. Broom was in blue with a sash. Ding-a-dong, and they all sang a song. "Oh, Shovely, so lovely," the poker he sang, "you have perfectly conquered my heart. Ding-a-dong, if you're pleased with my song, I will feed you with cold apple tart. When you scrape up the coals with a delicate sound, you enrapture my life with delight. Your nose is so shiny, your head is so round, and your shape is so slender and bright. Ding-a-dong, ain't you pleased with my song?" "Alas, Mrs. Broom," sighed the Tongs in his song, "oh, is it because I'm so thin? And my legs are so long, ding-a-dong, that you don't care about me a pin? Ah, fairest of creatures, when sweeping the room, oh, why don't you heed my complaint? Must you needs be so cruel, you beautiful broom, because you are covered with paint? Ding-a-dong, you are certainly wrong." Mrs. Broom and Miss Shovel together they sang, "What nonsense you're singing today!" Said the Shovel, "I'll certainly hit you a bang!" Said the Broom, "and I'll sweep you away." So the coachman drove homeward as fast as he could, perceiving their anger with pain. But they put on the kettle, and little by little they all became happy again. Ding-a-dong, there's an end of my song. The Table and the Chair. Said the table to the chair, "You can hardly be aware how I suffer from the heat and from chilblains on my feet. If we took a little walk, we might have a little talk. Pray let us take the air," said the table to the chair. Said the chair unto the table, "Now you know we are not able. How foolishly you talk, when you know we cannot walk." Said the table with a sigh, "It can do no harm to try. I've as many legs as you. Why can't we walk on two?" So they both went slowly down, and walked about the town, with a cheerful bumpy sound, as they toddled round and round. And everybody cried, as they hastened to their side, "See, the table and the chair have come out to take the air." But in going down an alley to a castle in the valley, they completely lost their way, and wandered all the day, till to see them safely back, they paid a ducky quack, and a beetle and a mouse, who took them to their house. Then they whispered to each other, "Oh, delightful little brother, what a lovely walk we've taken! Let us dine on beans and bacon." So the ducky and the leetle, Brownie Mouse and the beetle, dined and danced upon their heads, till they toddled to their beds. The Dong with a Luminous Nose. When awful darkness and silence reign over the great Gromboolian plain, through the long, long wintry nights, when the angry breakers roar, as they beat on the rocky shore, when storm clouds brood on the towering heights of the hills of the Chankly-Bore. Then through the vast and gloomy dark there moves what seems a fiery spark, a lonely spark with silvery rays, piercing the coal-black night. A meteor strange and bright. Hither and thither the vision strays, a single lurid light. Slowly it wanders, pauses, creeps. Anon it sparkles, flashes, and leaps. And ever as onward it gleaming goes, a light on the bong tree stems it throws, and those who watch at that midnight hour, from hall or terrace or lofty tower, cry as the wild light passes along, "The dong! The dong! The wandering dong through the forest goes, the dong! The dong! The dong with a luminous nose!" Long years ago, the dong was happy and gay, till he fell in love with a Jumbly girl who came to those shores one day. For the Jumblies came in a sieve, they did, landing at eve near the Zemery Fid, where the oblong oysters grow, and the rocks are smooth and grey. And all the woods and the valleys rang with the chorus they daily and nightly sang. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. Happily, happily passed those days while the cheerful Jumblies stayed. They danced in circlets all night long to the plaintive pipe of the lively dong in moonlight, shine, or shade. For day and night he was always there, by the side of the Jumbly girl so fair, with her sky-blue hands and her sea-green hair, till the morning came of that hateful day when the Jumblies sailed in their sieve away. And the dong was left on the cruel shore, gazing, gazing forevermore, ever keeping his weary eyes on that pea-green sail on the far horizon, singing the Jumbly chorus still, as he sate all day on the grassy hill. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. But when the sun was low in the west, the dong arose and said, "What little sense I once possessed has quite gone out of my head." And since that day he wanders still, by lake and forest, marsh and hill, singing, "Oh, somewhere in valley or plain might I find my Jumbly girl again. Forever I'll seek by lake and shore till I find my Jumbly girl once more." Playing a pipe with silvery squeaks, since then his Jumbly girl he seeks. And because by night he could not see, he gathered the bark of the twan-gum tree on the flowery plain that grows, and he wove him a wondrous nose, a nose as strange as a nose could be, of vast proportions and painted red, and tied with cords to the back of his head. In a hollow rounded space it ended, with a luminous lamp within suspended, all fenced about with a bandage stout, to prevent the wind from blowing it out, and with holes all round to send the light in gleaming rays on the dismal night. And now each night and all night long, over those plains still roams the dong, and above the wail of the chimp and snipe you may hear the squeak of his plaintive pipe, while ever he seeks, but seeks in vain, to meet with his Jumbly girl again. Lonely and wild all night he goes, the dong with a luminous nose. And all who watch at the midnight hour, from hall or terrace or lofty tower, cry as they trace the meteor bright, moving along through the dreary night. "This is the hour when forth he goes, the dong with the luminous nose. Yonder, over the plain he goes, he goes, he goes, the dong with the luminous nose." The Two Old Bachelors. 2 old bachelors were living in one house. One caught a muffin, the other caught a mouse. Said he who caught the muffin to him who caught the mouse, "This happens just in time, for we've nothing in the house, save a tiny slice of lemon and a teaspoonful of honey. And what to do for dinner, since we haven't any money? And what can we expect if we haven't any dinner, but to lose our teeth and eyelashes and keep on growing thinner? Said he who caught the mouse to him who caught the muffin, "We might cook this little mouse if we only had some stuffin'. If we had but sage and onion, we could do extremely well. But how to get that stuffin' it is difficult to tell." Those two old bachelors ran quickly to the town, and asked for sage and onion as they wandered up and down. They borrowed 2 large onions, but no sage was to be found, in the shops or in the market, or in all the gardens round. But someone said, "A hill there is, a little to the north, and to its perpendicular top a narrow way leads forth. And there among the rugged rocks abides an ancient sage, an earnest man who reads all day a most perplexing page. Climb up and seize him by the toes, all studious as he sits, and pull him down and chop him into endless little bits. Then mix him with your onions, cut up likewise into scraps. Then your stuffin' will be ready, and very good, perhaps." Those 2 old bachelors, without loss of time, the nearly perpendicular crags at once began to climb. And at the top, among the rocks, all seated in a nook, they saw that sage a-reading of a most enormous book. "You earnest sage," aloud they cried, "your book you've read enoughin'. We wish to chop you into bits and mix you into stuffin'." But that old sage looked calmly up, and with his awful book, at those 2 bachelors' bald heads a certain aim he took. And over crag and precipice they rolled promiscuous down. At once they rolled and never stopped, in lane or field or town. And when they reached their house they found, besides their want of stuffin', the mouse had fled, and previously had eaten up the muffin. They left their home in silence by the once convenient door, and from that hour those bachelors were never heard of more. The Pelican Chorus. King and queen of the pelicans we, no other birds so grand we see. None but we have feet like fins, with lovely leathery throats and chins. Pluffskin, pelican G, we think no bird so happy as we. Plumpskin, ploshkin, pelican Jill, we think so then, and we thought so still. We live on the Nile we love. By night we sleep on the cliffs above. By day we fish, and at eve we stand on long bare islands of yellow sand. And when the sun sinks slowly down, and the great rock walls grow dark and brown, where the purple river rolls fast and dim, and the ivory ibis star-like skim, wing to wing we dance around, stamping our feet with a flumpy sound, opening our mouths as pelicans ought, and this is the song we nightly snort. Plopskin, pluffskin, pelican G, we think no bird so happy as we. Plumpskin, ploshkin, pelican Jill, we think so then, and we thought so still. Last year came out our daughter Dell, and all the birds received her well. To do her honor a feast we made, for every bird that can swim or wade. Herons and gulls and cormorants black, cranes and flamingos with scarlet back, plovers and storks and geese in clouds, swans and dillberry ducks in crowds. Thousands of birds in wondrous flight, they ate and drank and danced all night. And echoing back from the rocks you heard, multitude echoes from bird to bird. Pluffskin, pelican G, we think no bird so happy as we. Plumpskin, ploshkin, pelican Jill, we think so then, and we thought so still. Yes, they came, and among the rest, the king of the cranes, all grandly dressed. Such a lovely tail its feathers float between the ends of his blue dress coat, with pea-green trousers all so neat, and a delicate frill to hide his feet. For though no one speaks of it, everyone knows he has got no webs between his toes. As soon as he saw our daughter Dell, in violent love that crane king fell, on seeing her waddling form so fair, with a wreath of shrimps in her short white hair. And before the end of the next long day, our Dell had given her heart away, for the king of the cranes had won that heart with a crocodile's egg and a large fish tart. She vowed to marry the king of the cranes, leaving the Nile for stranger plains, and away they flew in a gathering crowd of endless birds in a lengthening cloud. Pluffskin, pelican G, we think no bird so happy as we. Plumpskin, ploshkin, pelican Jill, we think so then, and we thought so still. And far away in the twilight sky, we heard them singing a lessening cry, farther and farther till out of sight, and we stood alone in the silent night. Often since, in the nights of June, we sit on the sand and watch the moon. She is gone to the great Gromboolian plain, and we probably never shall meet again. Oft in the long still nights of June, we sit on the rocks and watch the moon. She dwells by the streams of the Chankly Bore, and we probably never shall see her more. Plofskin, pelican G, we think no birds so happy as we. Plumpskin, ploshkin, pelican Jill, we think so then, and we thought so still. Edward Lear has actually written a tune for this poem as well as the upcoming poem, and since I can read sheet music, I will sing both of them for you. King and queen of the pelicans we, no other bird so grand we see, none but we have feet like fins, with lovely leathery throats and chins. Plofskin, pelican G, we think no bird so happy as we. Plumskin, pelican Jill, we think so then and we thought so still. The Courtship of the Yongy Bongy Beau. On the coast of Cormandonnell, where the early pumpkins blow, in the middle of the woods lived the Yongy Bongy Beau. 2 old chairs and half a candle, 1 old jug without a handle. These were all his worldly goods. In the middle of the woods, these were all his worldly goods, of the Yongy Bongy Beau, of the Yongy Bongy Beau. Once among the bong trees walking, where the early pumpkins blow, to a little heap of stones came the Yongy Bongy Beau. There he heard a lady talking to some milk-white hens of Dorking. "'Tis the Lady Jingly Jones! On that little heap of stones sits the Lady Jingly Jones!" said the Yongy Bongy Beau, said the Yongy Bongy Beau. Lady Jingly, sitting where the pumpkins blow, will you come and be my wife?" said the Yongy Bongy Beau. "I am tired of living singly, on this coast so wild and shingly. I'm a-weary of my life. If you'll come and be my wife, quite serene would be my life," said the Yongy Bongy Beau, said the Yongy Bongy Beau. "On this coast of Cormandonnell shrimps and watercresses grow. Prawns are plentiful and cheap," said the Yongy Bongy Beau. "You shall have my chairs and candle, and my jug without a handle. Gaze upon the rolling deep. Fish is plentiful and cheap. As the sea my love is deep," said the Yongy Bongy Beau, said the Yongy Bongy Beau. Lady Jingly answered sadly, and her tears began to flow. "Your proposal comes too late, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau. I would be your wife most gladly," here she twirled her fingers madly, "but in England I've a mate. Yes, you've asked me far too late, for in England I've a mate, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau. Mr. Jones, his name is Handel Jones, Esquire and Co. Dorking fowls delights to send Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau. Keep your chairs and candle, and your jug without a handle. I can merely be your friend. Should my Jones more Dorking send, I will give you 3, my friend. Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau. Though you've such a tiny body, and your head so large doth grow, though your hat may blow away, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau, though you're such a haughty doddy, yet I wish that I could modify the words I needs must say. Will you please to go away? That is all I have to say. Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau, Mr. Yongy Bongy Beau." Down the slippery slopes of Myrtle, where the early pumpkins blow, to the calm and silent sea fled the Yongy Bongy Beau. There beyond the bay of Gurtle lay a large and lively turtle. "You're the cove," he said, "for me. On your back beyond the sea, turtle, you shall carry me," said the Yongy Bongy Beau, said the Yongy Bongy Beau. Through the silent roaring ocean did the turtle swiftly go. Holding fast upon his shell rode the Yongy Bongy Beau. With a sad primeval motion towards the sunset isles of Boshen, still the turtle bore him well. holding fast upon his shell. "Lady Jingly Jones, farewell!" sang the yongy bongy bow, sang the yongy bongy bow. From the coast of Cormandonnell did that lady never go. On that heap of stones she mourns for the yongy bongy bow. On that coast of Cormandonnell, in his jug without a handle, still she weeps and daily moans. On that little heap of stones to her dorking hens she moans for the yongy bongy bow, for the yongy bongy bow. On the coast of Cormandonnell, where the early pumpkins grow, in the middle of the woods, live the yongy bongy bow. 2 old chairs and half a candle, 1 old jug without a handle, these were all his worldly goods. In the middle of the woods, these were all the worldly goods of the yongy bongy bow, of the yongy bongy bow. The Pobble Who Has No Toes. The Pobble who has no toes had once as many as we. When they said, "Some day you may lose them all," he replied, "Fish fiddle-dee-dee." And his Aunt Jobiska made him drink lavender water tinged with pink, for she said the world in general knows there's nothing so good for a Pobble's toes. The Pobble Who Has No Toes swam across the Bristol Channel, but before he set out he wrapped his nose in a piece of scarlet flannel, for his Aunt Jobiska said no harm can come to his toes if his nose is warm, and it's perfectly known that a Pobble's toes are safe, provided he minds his nose. The Pobble swam fast and well, and when boats or ships came near him, he tinkledy-binkledy-winkled the bell so that all the world could hear him. And all the sailors and admirals cried when they saw him nearing the further side, "He is gone to fish for his Aunt Jobiska's runcible cat with crimson whiskers." But before he touched the shore of the Bristol Channel, a sea-green porpoise carried away his wrapper of scarlet flannel. And when he came to observe his feet, formerly garnished with toes so neat, his face at once became forlorn, on perceiving that all his toes were gone. And nobody ever knew, from that dark day to the present, whoso had taken the Pobble's toes in a matter so far from pleasant. Whether the shrimps or crawfish grey, or crafty mermaids stole them away, nobody knew, and nobody knows, how the Pobble was robbed of his twice 5 toes. The Pobble Who Has No Toes was placed in a friendly bark, and they rowed him back and they carried him up to his Aunt Jobiska's park, and she made him a feast at his earnest wish of eggs and buttercups fried with fish, and she said, "It's a fact the whole world knows that Pobbles are happier without their toes." The New Vestments. There lived an old man in the kingdom of Tess, who invented a purely original dress, and when it was perfectly made and complete, he opened the door and walked into the street. By way of a hat he'd a loaf of brown bread, in the middle of which he inserted his head. His shirt was made up of no end of dead mice, the warmth of whose skins was quite fluffy and nice. His drawers were of rabbit skins, so were his shoes. His stockings were skins, but it is not known whose. His waistcoat and trousers were made of pork chops. His buttons were jujubes and chocolate drops. His coat was all pancakes with jam for a border, and a girdle of biscuits to keep them in order. And he wore over all, as a screen from bad weather, a cloak of green cabbage leaves stitched all together. He had walked a short way when he heard a great noise, of all sorts of beastical birdlings and boys. And from every long street and dark lane in the town, beast, birdles, and boys in a tumult rushed down. 2 cows and a calf ate his cabbage-leaf cloak, 4 apes seized his girdle, which vanished like smoke. 3 kids ate up half of his pancakey coat, and the tails were devoured by an ancient he-goat. An army of dogs in a twinkling tore up his pork waistcoat and trousers to give to their puppies. And while they were growling and mumbling the chops, 10 boys prigged the jujubes and chocolate drops. He tried to run back to his house, but in vain, for scores of fat pigs came again and again. They rushed out of stables and hovels and doors. They tore off his stockings, his shoes, and his drawers. And now from the housetops with screechings descend, striped spotted white, black, and grey cats without end. They jumped on his shoulders and knocked off his hat. When crows, ducks, and hens made a mincemeat of that, they speedily flew at his sleeves in a trice, and utterly tore up his shirt of dead mice. They swallowed the last of his shirt with a squall, whereon he ran home with no clothes on at all. And he said to himself as he bolted the door, I will not wear a similar dress any more, never more. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus. First part. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus climbed to the top of a wall, and they sate to watch the sunset sky, and to hear the nuppeter pifkin cry, and the biscuit buffalo call. They took up a roll and some chamomile tea, and both were as happy could be, till Mrs. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ! It has just come into my head. Suppose we should happen to fall? Darling Mr. Discobolus, suppose we should fall down flumpety, just like two pieces of stone, onto the thorns or into the moat. What would become of your new green coat? And might you not break a bone? It never occurred to me before that perhaps we shall never go down any more." And Mrs. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, what put it into your head to climb up this wall, my own darling Mr. Discobolus?" Mr. Discobolus answered, "At first it gave me pain, and I felt my ears turn perfectly pink when your exclamation made me think we might never get down again. But now I believe it is wiser far to remain forever just where we are." And Mr. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. We shall never go down again, dearest Mrs. Discobolus." So Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus stood up and began to sing, "Far away from hurry and strife, here we will pass the rest of our life. Ding-a-dong, ding-dong, ding. We want no knives, nor forks, nor chairs, no tables, nor carpets, nor household cares. From worry of life we've fled. Oh, WXYZ, there is no more trouble ahead, sorrow or any such thing, for Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus." Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus. Second part. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus lived on the top of the wall for 20 years, a month, and a day, till their hair had grown all pearly grey, and their teeth began to fall. They never were ill or at all dejected, by all admired and by some respected, till Mrs. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. We have no more room at all. Darling Mr. Discobolus, look at our 6 fine boys, and our 6 sweet girls so fair. Upon this wall they have all been born, and not one of 12 has happened to fall through my maternal care. Surely they should not pass their lives without any chance of husband or wives." And Mrs. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, did it never come into your head that our lives must be lived elsewhere, dearest Mr. Discobolus? They have never been at a ball, nor have even seen a bazaar, nor have heard folks say in a tone all hearty, what lovely girls at a garden party those Mrs. Discobolus are. Morning and night it drives me wild to think of the fate of each darling child." But Mr. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, what has come to your fiddledum head? What a runcible goose you are, octopod Mrs. Discobolus." Suddenly Mr. Discobolus slid from the top of the wall, and beneath it he dug a dreadful trench, and filled it with dynamite, gunpowder, gench. And aloud he began to call, "Let the wild bee sing, and the blue bird hum, for the end of your lives has certainly come." And Mrs. Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, we shall presently all be dead, on this ancient runcible wall. Terrible Mr. Discobolus." Pensively Mr. Discobolus sat with his back to the wall. He lighted a match and fired the train, and the mortified mountain echoed again to the sound of an awful fall. And all the Discobolus family flew in thousands of bits to the sky so blue, and no one was left to have said, "Oh, WXYZ, has it come into anyone's head that the end has happened to all of the whole of the clan of Discobolus?" The Quangle Wangle's Hat. On the top of the crumpety tree, the quangle-wangle sat, but his face you could not see, on account of his beaver hat. For his hat was 102 feet wide, with ribbons and bibbins on every side, and bells and buttons and loops and lace, so that nobody ever could see the face of the quangle-wangle quee. The quangle-wangle said to himself on the crumpety tree, "Jam and jelly and bread are the best of food for me. But the longer I live on this crumpety tree, the plainer than ever it seems to me that very few people come this way, and that life on the whole is far from gay," said the quangle-wangle quee. But there came to the crumpety tree Mr. and Mrs. Canary, and they said, "Did you ever see any spot so charmingly airy? May we build a nest on your lovely hat? Mr. Quangle-wangle, grant us that. Oh, please let us come and build a nest of whatever material suits you best, Mr. Quangle-wangle quee." And besides to the crumpety tree came the stork, the duck, and the owl, the snail and the bumblebee, the frog and the fimble-fowl. The fimble-fowl with a corkscrew leg, and all them said, "We humbly beg we may build our homes on your lovely hat. Mr. Quangle-wangle, grant us that. Mr. Quangle-wangle quee." And the golden grouse came there, and the pobble who has no toes, and the small Olympian bear, and the dong with a luminous nose, and the blue baboon who played the flute, and the orient calf from the land of Toot, and the atry squash, and the bisky bat, all came and built on the lovely hat of the quangle-wangle quee. And the quangle-wangle said to himself on the crumpety tree, "When all these creatures move, what a wonderful noise there'll be!" And at night by the light of the mulberry moon they danced to the flute of the blue baboon, on the broad green leaves of the crumpety tree, and all were as happy could be, with the quangle-wangle quee. The Cummerbund, an Indian poem. She sate upon her dobby to watch the evening star, and all the punkas as they passed cried, "My, how fair you are!" Around her bower with quivering leaves the tall kamsamas grew, and kitmugars and wild festoons hung down from choskis blue. Below her home the river rolled with soft melodious sound, where golden-finned praises swam in myriads circling round. Above on tallest trees remote green aiaias perched alone, and all night long the mussuk moaned its melancholy tone. And where the purple nullahs threw their branches far and wide, and silvery gory wallahs flew in silence side by side, the little beastie's twittering cry rose on the fragrant air, and oft the angry jampan howled deep in his hateful lair. She sate upon her dobby, she heard the nimick hum, when all at once a cry arose, "The Cummerbund is come!" In vain she fled with open jaws, the angry monster followed, and so, before assistance came, that lady fair was swallowed. They sought in vain for even a bone respectfully to bury. They said hers was a dreadful fate, and Echo answered, "Very." They nailed her dobby to the wall where last her form was seen, and underneath they wrote these words in yellow, blue, and green: "Beware, ye fair, beware, nor sit out late at night, lest horrid Cummerbund should come and swallow you outright." The Akond of Sawat. Who or why or which or what is the Akond of Sawat? Is he tall or short or dark or fair? Does he sit on a stool or a sofa or chair, or squat? The Akond of Sawat. Is he wise or foolish, young or old? Does he drink his soup and his coffee cold or hot? The Akond of Sawat. Does he sing or whistle, jabber or talk, and when riding abroad does he gallop or walk, or trot? The Akond of Sawat. Does he wear a turban, a fez, or a hat? Does he sleep on a mattress, a bed, or a mat, or a cot? The Akond of Sawat. When he writes a copy in round hand size, does he cross his T's and finish his I's with a dot? The Akond of Sawat. Can he write a letter concisely clear, without a speck, or a smudge, or a smear, or a blot? The Akond of So What? Do his people like him extremely well, or do they, whenever they can, rebel, or plot? At the Akond of So What? If he catches them then, either old or young, does he have them chopped in pieces or hung, or shot? The Akond of So What? Do his people prig in the lanes or park, or even at times when days are dark? Garot? Oh, the Akond of So What? Does he study the wants of his own dominion, or doesn't he care for public opinion a jot? The Akond of So What? To amuse his mind, do people show him pictures or anyone's last new poem, or what? For the Akond of So What? At night, if he suddenly screams and wakes, do they bring him only a few small cakes, or a lot? For the Akond of So What? Does he live on turnips, tea, or tripe? Does he like his shawl to be marked with a stripe, or a dot? The Akond of So What? Does he like to lie on his back in a boat, like the lady who lived in that isle remote? Charlotte? The Akond of So What? Is he quiet or always making a fuss? Is his steward a Swiss, a Swede, or a Russ, or a Scot? The Akond of So What? Does he like to sit by the calm blue wave, or to sleep and snore in a dark green cave, or a grot? The Akond of So What? Does he drink small beer from a silver jug, or a bowl, or a glass, or a cup, or a mug, or a pot? The Akond of So What? Does he beat his wife with a gold-top pipe when she lets the gooseberries grow too ripe, or rot? The Akond of So What? Does he wear a white tie when he dines with friends, and tie it neat in a bow with ends, or a knot? The Akond of So What? Does he like new cream and hate mince pies? When he looks at the sun, does he wink his eyes, or not? The Akond of So What? Does he teach his subjects to roast and bake? Does he sail about on an inland lake, in a yacht? The Akond of So What? Someone or nobody knows I what, who or which or why or what, is the Akond of So What? Incidents in the life of my Uncle Arley. Oh, my aged Uncle Arley, sitting on a heap of barley through the silent hours of night. Close beside a leafy thicket, on his nose there was a cricket, in his hat a railway ticket, but his shoes were far too tight. Long ago in youth he squandered all his goods away, and wandered to the Tinniscoop hills afar. There on golden sunsets blazing, every evening found him gazing, singing, "Orb, you're quite amazing! How I wonder what you are!" Like the ancient Medes and Persians, always by his own excursions, he subsisted on those hills, whilst by teaching children spelling, or at times by merely yelling, or at intervals by selling Proctor's Nicodemus pills. Later in his morning rambles he perceived the moving brambles, something square and white disclose. 'Twas a first-class railway ticket, but on stooping down to pick it, off the ground a pea-green cricket settled on my uncle's nose. Never, never more, oh never, did that cricket leave him ever, dawn or evening, day or night, clinging as a constant treasure, chirping with the cheerish measure, wholly to my uncle's pleasure, though his shoes were far too tight. So for 43 winters, till his shoes were worn to splinters, all those hills he wandered o'er, sometimes silent, sometimes yelling, till he came to Borley Melling, near his old ancestral dwelling, but his shoes were far too tight. On a little heap of barley died my aged Uncle Arley, and they buried him one night. Close beside the leafy thicket, there his hat and railway ticket, there his ever faithful cricket, but his shoes were far too tight. Before I read the last poem, I would just like to thank you for tuning in to Brendan Moyer's Playwright Corner. If you like what I do, be it this or my music or whatever else that I'm currently doing at the present moment, you can help support me on Patreon. You can follow me on Instagram, follow me on Spotify, anywhere, and any sort of help is very much appreciated. I hope to grow this channel to the point where I can read modern plays without any licensing issues. So again, any sort of help to help grow this channel so that I can do that would be very much appreciated. And now for the final poem, Eclogue. Edvardus, what makes you look so black, so glum, so cross? Is it neuralgia, headache, or remorse? Johannes, what makes you look as cross, or even more so, less like a man that is a broken torso? What if my life is odious, should I grin? If you are savage, need I care a pin? And if I suffer, am I then an owl? May I not frown and grind my teeth and growl? Of course you may, but may I not growl too? May I not frown and grind my teeth like you? See, Catherine comes, to her, let each his several miseries refer. She shall decide whose woes are least or worst, and which, as growler, shall rank last or first. Catherine, proceed to growl, in silence I'll attend, and hear your foolish growlings to the end. And when they're done I shall correctly judge, which of your griefs are real or only fudge. Begin, let each his mournful voice prepare, and pray, however angry, do not swear. We came abroad for warmth and fine sharp cold. Kansas an imposition, and were sold. Why did I leave my native land to find sharp hailstones, snow, and most disgusting wind? What boots it that we orange trees or lemons see, if we must suffer from such vile inclemency? Why did I take the lodgings I have got, where all I don't want is, all I want not? Last week I called aloud, oh, 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 oh! The ground is wholly overspread with snow. Is that at any rate a theme for mirth, which makes a sugar cake of all the earth? Why must I sneeze and snuffle, groan and cough, if my hat's on my head, or if it's off? Why must I sink all poetry in this prose, the everlasting blowing of my nose? When I walk out, the mud my footsteps clogs. Besides, I suffer from attacks of dogs. Me, a vast awful bulldog black and brown, completely terrified when near the town. As calves perceiving butchers trembling reel, so did my calves the approaching monsters feel. Already from 2 rooms we're driven away, because the beastly chimneys smoke all day. Is this a trifle? Say, is this a joke, that we like ham should be becooked in smoke? Say, what avails it that my servant speaks Italian, English, Arabic, and Greek, besides Albanian, if he don't speak French? How can he ask for salt or shrimps or tench? When on the foolish hearth fresh wood I place, it whistles, sings, and squeaks before my face. And if it does, unless the fire burns bright, and if it does yet squeaks, how can I write? Alas, I needs must go and call on swells, that they may say, pray draw me the estrels. On one I went last week to leave a card. The swell was out, the servant eyed me hard. This chap's a thief disguised, his face expressed. If I go there again, may I be blessed. Why must I suffer in this wind and gloom? Rheumatics in a vile cold attic room. Swells drive about the road with haste and fury, as Jehu drove about all over Jewry. Just now, while walking slowly, I was all but ran over by the Lady Emma Talbot, whom not long since a lovely babe I knew, with eyes and cap ribbons of perfect blue. Downstairs and upstairs every blessed minute, there's each room with pianofortes in it. How can I write with noises such as those, and being always discomposed compose? 7 Germans through my garden lately strayed, and all on instruments of torture played. They blew, they screamed, they yelled, how can I paint, unless my room is quiet, which it ain't? How can I study if 100 flies each moment blunder into both my eyes? How can I draw with green or blue or red, if flies and beetles vex my old bald head? How can I translate German metaphysics if mosquitoes round my forehead whiz? I've bought some bacon, though it's much too fat, but round the house there prowls a hideous cat. Once should I see my bacon in her mouth, what care I if my rooms look north or south? Pain from a pane in one cracked window comes, which sings and whistles, buzzes, shrieks, and hums. In vain amain with the pain with this cord, I fain would strain to stop the beastly discord. If rain and wind and snow and such like ills continue here, how shall I pay my bills? For who through cold and slush and rain will come to see my drawings and to purchase some? And if they don't, what destiny is mine? How can I ever get to Palestine? The blinding sun strikes through the olive trees when I walk out and always makes me sneeze. Next door, if all night long the moon is shining, there sits a dog who wakes me up with whining. Forbear, you both are bores, you've growled enough. No longer will I listen to such stuff. All men have nuisances and bores to afflict them. Hark then, and bow to my official dictum. For you, Johannes, there is most excuse. Some interruptions are the very deuce. You're younger than the other cove, who surely might have some sense. Besides, you're somewhat poorly. This, therefore, is my sentence, that you nurse the baby for 7 hours, and nothing worse. For you, Edvardus, I shall say no more than that your griefs are fudge, yourself a bore. Return at once to cold-stewed minced hashed mutton, to wristbands ever guiltless of a button, to raging winds and sea where don't you wish your luck may ever let you catch one fish, to make large drawings nobody will buy, to paint oil pictures which will never dry, to write new books which nobody will read, to drink weak tea on tough old pigs to feed, till springtime brings the birds and leaves and flowers, and time restores a world of happier hours. And that is the end of Part 3 of Edward Lear's complete nonsense, entitled Nonsense Songs. If you have a request for what you would like to hear me read next, or if you have a play of your own that you would like to hear read, please contact me at bemuseartsinc@gmail.com. That's bemuseartsinc@gmail.com. Thank you, and I hope to have you back in Brendan Moyer's Playwright Corner.